A pallid dawn stretched over Blackwater Bay, the light cautious as though unsure it wished to reveal the scars still graven in the water from the wildfire inferno of years past. On the terrace of the ancient keep at Dragonstone, Daenerys Targaryen felt the salt-bitten breeze tangle in her silver-pale hair, and tasted iron on her tongue, as if the sea itself remembered the blood once poured into its waves. Drogon, black and colossal, clung to the basalt spines of the stone drum tower above her, wings half-mantled in lazy menace. Rhaegal and Viserion dozed farther along the curtain wall, tails curled like gilded chains about merlons eroded by storms older than Aegon's Landing. The dragons slept, yet their slow breath made the fortress vibrate like a living heart. In that tremor, Daenerys felt her own pulse steady, heard the faint hammering of men in the yard below, and allowed herself, for the span of a single exhalation, to be only a woman listening to ordinary toil, instead of a queen measuring the realm's wounds against the limits of her healing. She turned from the parapet and let her gaze drift down the slope of dragon-glass roofs toward the small smithy Tyrion had insisted be erected beside the old septi. Smoke braided upward from its ruddy chimney, smelling of pine pitch and hot iron. Those scents did not belong to Dragonstone's primitive austerity. They belonged to King's Landing's crowded warrens and Flea Bottom's forge fires. Yet here they were, innocent as new growth thrusting through volcanic stone. The anvil's ring, brisk and sure, carried to the high courtyard where she waited. Perhaps a dozen men swung hammers there. But the sound she tracked was only one clang among many, a rhythm subtly unlike the rest, deliberate, respectful, as though the smith cared for the metal as he shaped it, rather than forcing obedience by brutality. That care caught Daenerys' ear the way a lullaby once ensnared the child she had been before exile and betrayal and fire. Behind her, boots scuffed cobbles. Ser Barristan Selmy's voice, more parchment than steel after so many campaigns, murmured her name. "Your Grace, the council gathers." "I hear them," she replied, though she did not turn. "Let them convene. I will come when he is finished." Ser Barristan said nothing more, but she felt his approval in the hush that followed. He had been Lord Commander to her murdered brother, yet still he marveled whenever she trusted her own instincts and refused the tyrannies of protocol. He understood the importance of small mercies, of pausing for a breath of salt wind, of honoring the chastened clangor of a young man forging blades for strangers who might kill or protect him in equal measure. And Barristan would have sensed, as she did, that those mercies were the first hints of the true victory she sought. Not castles or crowns, but the knitting together of people too long sundered. The forge door opened. Heat and light poured out, red as a dragon's throat. A lean, dark-haired figure emerged, barrack-armed, his rough-spun shirt unlaced at the neck. Black hair damp with honest sweat rather than fear. Gendry Waters. No, that name would change soon, if whispers turned to law. Gendry Baratheon, though born in stealth and gutter smoke, possessed a jaw carved straight from Robert's youth, shoulders broad as if made to heft a warhammer, and an openness of expression that might have been innocence had life not stripped him of the right to remain naive. He carried a newly fashioned spearhead in padded tongs, inspecting the edge with a craftsman's calm pride. The crimson glow bled away as iron cooled, until the blade shimmered silver in the morning. Gendry traced his thumb along the line he had ground, testing for burrs. Only when satisfied did he look up and see the queen watching. Their eyes met across the gulf of courtyard and rampart. To Daenerys, the moment felt like a coin flipping end over end. She saw Robert's defiance in the set of his brow, Ned Stark's quiet decency in the measured hush before he addressed her, and a raw potential neither of those ghosts had ever displayed. The promise that a bastard could choose his own legend instead of answering to another's prophecy. For Gendry, seeing her radiant against a backdrop of dragons and dawn was to glimpse a vision bards could scarce believe. He did not bow instantly. His hands were full and seared with work, but his head lowered fractionally in acknowledgement, and no fear laced his posture. He simply recognized her as one whose will shaped the world, just as the anvil shaped steel. And Daenerys recognized, with a pang as keen as homesickness, that this youth could become the hinge upon which 7 kingdoms, and perhaps her own heart, might turn. When she descended the narrow stairs and crossed to him, Rhaegal stirred, sensing her intent. Gendry tensed at the scraping of obsidian talons overhead, yet did not flinch. Good, she thought. Courage that is conscious of danger, yet stands its ground, is rarer than dragon glass. She stopped a sword's reach away, close enough to feel heat still rising from the spearhead. "You forge weapons for my soldiers," she said, studying the gleam dancing along its edge. "Do you know whose lives your handiwork may save?" He considered. "Yours, perhaps. Or maybe the lives of men who once hunted me in the streets," he replied. His voice had the richness of the Stormlands, storm-goak and honey, carrying both laughter and thunder. "Steel is honest, your grace. It don't care about banners." "Honest," she echoed. "Us bastards sometimes prove more honest than those called trueborn." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Gendry's cheeks colored, but he raised his chin. "Truth or not, I know what I am. And what you might become." She touched the cool tip with one pale finger. "A craftsman shapes more than iron. With the right fire, he can remold the fate others hammered for him." Her gaze flicked toward the council chamber archway where Tyrion's silhouette loitered, sipping wine as though the cliffside wind were a tavern yard. He inclined his goblet in subtle encouragement. The notion had been his, born of sleepless speculation and an old maester's genealogies, that by uniting Targaryen and Baratheon blood through adoption, Daenerys could quiet half the pretensions clanging across Westeros. The Lannisters' crimson roar, the Tyrell roses crushed beneath Cersei's heel, the stark direwolves howling from frozen battlements. All those clamors might fade if the house once crowned by stag, and the house once crowned by dragon, spoke together in the tongue of kinship. Yet Tyrion's words would have remained dusty ink had Daenerys not felt her pulse drum to the same cadence the night she first watched Gendry work. The certainty that here stood not a pawn but a bridge. She motioned for him to walk. Curious, he obeyed. They crossed beneath an ancient archway carved with runic Valyrian script, promising safety to supplicants and doom to tyrants alike. In the shadowed cloister beyond, light broke through rose-slit windows in shards, painting their faces gold and scarlet. The thrum of the forge faded, replaced by lapping surf far below, and the distant bicker of gulls. It felt like the nave of some forgotten temple, and Daenerys found herself speaking with reverence. "Do you curse your birth?" she asked. He ran a thumb across calloused fingers. "Used to. Thought being bastard meant being less. Flea bottom teaches you that quick. But the Brotherhood without banners taught me different. Lord Beric, Thoros. They said there's more honor in a name earned than one granted. Then perhaps you will understand my offer." She halted, letting him face her squarely. "I have dragons, armies, titles. Yet the realm I mean to heal bleeds from one wound above all others. The wound of lineage set against lineage, each claiming the Iron Throne by right of birth. But birth also forged you. An unclaimed Baratheon, just as exile forged me. What if we tempered those two brands into a single sigil?" Gendry's brows knit. "You would make me prince, not prince," she corrected softly. "Jarl. My own blood is scarce. Should the gods deny me children, I would see the realms of men trust the future to hands we both believe in. Hands that know the weight of a hammer before the weight of a crown. Diumu." He laughed, disbelief bright but not mocking. "You hardly know me, your grace. I know your work. I know you rode for your life rather than kneel to a red god's pyre. I know you faced Lannister gold cloaks alone on a riverbank to spare a friend. And I know the honor you spoke of did not wither when gold was scarce. I have known lords with weaker metal." A gust hissed through the corridor, fluttering tarred banners overhead. Gendry looked upward, as though expecting Robert's ghost to step from the shadows and demand his bastard wield a warhammer in his stead. Instead, only the echo of wind answered. "I worked in a smithy while Joffrey sat his gilded chair," he said slowly. "When someone called for Baratheon steel, I feared the day they'd learn the blood in my veins matched the sigil on their sword hilts. Now you would make me that sigil's keeper. Together we forge a new one," she countered. The crowned stag beside the three-headed dragon. Fire and storm, unbroken. She touched a hand to his forearm, warm skin beneath ashen soot. Say yes or no. But know that if you accept, I will call you son before all the lords of Westeros, and any man who utters bastard in your hearing will answer to me and to Drogon alike." He searched her face as though reading a vellum unknown script. The lines of exile, the softening fight carved around her eyes each time she freed a slave or spared an enemy. He saw no cruelty there, only a ferocious longing for a home she'd never known and might yet create. At last his mouth shaped one word, rusted from disuse. "Mother." The title shocked them both. He half-stepped back, but she seized his elbow gently and gave a tremulous half-laugh that carried a quiver near tears. "Too soon," she whispered. Yet the admission thrilled her. "But perhaps someday." Tyrion's cane tapped stone. "Forgive the interruption," he drawled, emerging like a cat from gloom. "But there is a war council awaiting the queen, and I suspect the newly minted lord of Storm's End." "Storm's End?" Gendry blurted. "That castle is in ruin." "All the more reason a smith should claim it," Tyrion said. "It needs rebuilding, and who better?" Daenerys laid a calming hand on Gendry's shoulder. "Come," she said. "Hear what future we might hammer into shape." They strode through the painted doors into the council chamber contiguous with the Heart Tower. A long table of black oak waited, its surface littered with drafts maps, quills, and 3 brooding candles melted to the likeness of miniature dragons. Tongues of flame flickering above wax wings. Missandei offered quiet welcome. Grey Worm stood sentinel near the arch, and Varys, ever watchful, hovered as a man learning whether his own webs now snared him. At the room's far end, Jon Snow leaned beside the hearth, arms crossed, expression inscrutable. He had sailed from the north mere days prior to warn of the Night King's deeper advance, but the grim intensity in his gray eyes now fixed upon Gendry as though on unexpected kin. Daenerys paused before the assembled, letting silence fall like a gauntlet. "My lords and counselors," she began, "you know why we gather. Yet before we speak of spears and fleets, I present a matter of blood and future. Nimmelwetter." She guided Gendry forward. Murmurs rose. Some recognized him from the anvil yard, others saw only Robert's kin come haunting. Jon's brow lifted minutely, but he did not move, as though wary of disturbing a delicate forge flame. "Gendry Storm, born of King Robert Baratheon, stands here today to be acknowledged." Daenerys' voice rang clear, echoing from obsidian walls. "I would name him Gendry of houses Baratheon and Targaryen, heir to my line, bound by choice rather than accident of birth. Let any who gainsay speak now." "Oh no." The hush that followed was less shock than calculation. Tyrion's eyes glittered with pride at his strategy and relief at its enactment. Varys fluttered plump fingers against his robes, perhaps measuring whispers not yet hatched. Missandei offered a faint, supportive smile. Only one voice responded, low but firm. "Your Grace," Jon Snow said, stepping away from the hearth. "I know this man." He met Gendry's startled glance, then addressed the Queen. On the wall's far side he risked freezing seas to return with us, though he had no vow compelling him. "Only friendship and duty. If you would choose a brother, there is none truer." Daenerys inclined her head in gratitude. "Then the matter is settled." Yet Gendry lifted his hands, palms upward in a Smith's silent plea. "One thing first," he said. "A hammer's no use if it's hollow. I'll not bear your name to soothe lordly pride and forget the small folk who suffer. Hut, if I'm to be heir, my crown will weigh the same on me as a helm on any bastard lad. I'll serve, on my knees, at the forge or on the field, until those you free can stand as tall as us." Nan. Emotion tightened Daenerys' throat, for he had spoken what she herself believed. "It shall be as you ask," she vowed. "You will remain smith and soldier until peace crowns us both." She reached within her cloak, withdrew a stag-headed torque, wrought of Valyrian steel, shot with dragon-glass veins, a symbol forged after midnight to her secret design. Gendry lowered his head. She placed the torque about his neck, its black metal gleaming star-bright. A hush thick as prayer blanketed the council. Tyrion clapped. "Now," he said, voice breezy against the room's gravity. "Shall we talk of Cersei's newly purchased golden company, and how a Baratheon prince might unnerve her sellswords?" But Daenerys had eyes only for her new ward, who straightened beneath the torque's weight with the measured grace of a man testing unfamiliar armor. She imagined the realm beyond Dragonstow's razor cliffs. Farmlands burnt to stubble, riverlands flooded with corpses, children orphaned by banners they never saw. She imagined Gendry riding beside her into those blighted fields, hammer lifted not for conquest, but for justice. And she felt, for the first time since her brother sold her like chattel to Khal Drogo, that her house, broken and wandering, might yet become a home. The meeting stretched towards midday, strategy unfurling like scrolls across the table. Logistics, alliances, ravens, dispatched to Storm's End. The Night King's pace measured in leagues per moon, the price of grain from the reach now that winter advanced. Gendry listened more than he spoke, absorbing the weight of each decision. When he did speak, it was with Smith's practicality. Where shipwrights could scavenge sound timbers, how many spearheads a single ton of raw iron might yield, which river fords could bear wagon trains without collapsing under weight. His frank competence impressed even Varys, who murmured commendations about useful lads. Yet beneath the brisk exchange Daenerys traced a quieter current. Each time another counselor addressed him as "My Lord," Gendry flinched, just slightly, like metal cooling too fast. She would temper him gradually, she resolved, lest he grow brittle and shatter. When at last the council recessed, Jon lingered. Daenerys watched from a sunlit embrasure as the two bastards, one legitimized by a dying king in the north, the other now adopted by a dragon queen, conversed in low tones. A rough clasp of forearms, a shared grin. They recognized in each other a truth knights and highborn might never grasp. That dignity need not be gifted, but seized by the worthy. Jon departed to inspect the dragons. Gendry returned to the forge, torque gleaming against soot-dark skin. Days blurred. Ravens departed. Ships were provisioned. Unsullied drilled upon the beach. Yet amid war's grind, Daenerys carved out pockets of stillness in which to know the son she had claimed. She found him lifting barrels in the yard for quartermasters, teaching two orphan girls how to braid wire for chainmail, whistling Stormland marches while filing arrowheads. Each time, Daenerys stood a while unseen, storing the images like fireflies in her heart. She sensed how their presence soothed him, and how hers, in turn, tightened a bond that already felt interwoven with the marrow of her bones. She addressed him by name often, Gendry, so the syllables shaped her lips like prayer, but she withheld the word son until it might settle upon them naturally as autumn's first leaf. One evening, torchlight leapt across the castle's inner ward as Unsullied sparred under Grey Worm's keen gaze. Daenerys leaned on the balustrade of a gallery, and Gendry joined her, smelling of hot iron and fresh-cut cedar. "Your dragons," he said, nodding toward the sky where Drogon wheeled crimson soaked against a bruised dusk. "They make the very air shiver." "They know you," she replied. "Drogon circled lower when you stepped from your forge this morning." "Maybe he wants a saddle." Gendry grinned, but awe sparkled in his eyes. "You ever think of forging armor for beasts that fly?" "My ancestors did," she mused. "But armor weighs a dragon down. Better they remain swift and terrible." Gendry's gaze followed Drogon's silhouette. "I never dreamed of heights beyond a city wall," he said quietly. "Now the sky itself feels nearer." She touched his wrist. "Whatever heights you reach, keep your feet planted in the earth. The realm will need steady ground when storms come." "Daenerys?" He considered that, then asked, "And when the storm is you?" Daenerys breathed a laugh. "Then I will need you to remind me which winds destroy and which carry seeds." A hush grew companionable. The clang of practice spears softened. When Gendry finally excused himself, promising to deliver freshly forged nails for shipwrights at dawn, Daenerys watched him vanish beneath the archway leading toward the smithy. Tyrion sidled into her periphery. "You've bought yourself goodwill among old Baratheon men, frightened them too," he said. "Cersei's ears will ring the moment rumor reaches King's Landing that Robert's actual blood now stands beside dragons." Daenerys nodded. Yet I see less war when I look at him, not more. Perhaps. Tyrion sipped wine. But remember, peace also sharpens its blade. The lad must be tempered to rule, or at least to follow. I will temper him. Tyrion cocked an eyebrow. Temper yourself as well, your grace. Motherhood is a forge hotter than wildfire. She opened her mouth to retort but paused. Somewhere within, beneath layers of titles and tragedies, a younger Daenerys stirred. The girl sold in marriage, who craved family more than dominion. She felt that hunger again, fierce and uncertain. Is it folly, she asked, voice low, to love so soon? Tyrion stared into his cup. In this world, love is the rarest metal. Shape it while you can, just mind the edges. Night fell. Outside the walls, breakers hammered the rocks, endlessly patient. In the forge, sparks flew like captive stars. Gendry labored beneath the glow. Singing any old tavern song that drifted back to him? Daenerys stood in the doorway and listened, her shadow flickering across the anvil's face, until the tune settled into her memory as surely as any lullaby. Beyond Dragonstone, kings plotted, White Walkers marched, and the Game of Thrones ground on. Yet inside that forge, two destinies redrew their lines. The last dragon and the last stag, mother and heir, queen and smith. And though no raven carried the news that night, Westeros tilted imperceptibly, like a caldera stirring beneath calm seas, its future melting and reforming in the crucible of a single silvery dawn. UNK. Moonrise found Dragonstone cloaked in pewter mist, the sky a quilt of bruised purples stitched with faint stars. In the yard a single forge still glowed, its embers banked low yet pulsing like a watchful eye. Daenerys stood just beyond the ring of light, wrapped in a sable cloak lined with pale fur. The hour was late enough that even Tyrion had deserted his wine for sleep, yet she could not bring herself to retire while the clang of iron echoed in her ears. Gendry labored in sleeveless silence, sweat shining on his arms, each measured blow striking sparks that flurried upward like fireflies before dying in the damp air. He did not look up when she approached. His focus seemed devotional, as though the red-hot billet were a scripture in need of revelation. She waited until he quenched the piece in oil, steam gusting up to wrap them both in a metallic fog that smelled of blood and lightning. Only then did he set the half-formed blade aside and wipe his brow with the back of a scarred wrist. "I thought you'd be asleep long ago," he said, voice husky but unstartled, "and missed the birth of a sword." Her hand drifted to the cooled metal. A rudimentary shape, yet even now she sensed purpose running through it like a spine. "Is this for one of the unsullied?" "For you," he answered, almost bashful. "Your old Dothraki Arak's edge is chipped where dragonglass bit at last skirmish. Steel this pure shouldn't dull, not with the fold I'm working." She traced a finger along the unfinished fuller. "You forge by moonlight for a queen who owns 3 dragons. Were you always so reckless with sleep?" "When the work matters, night's a candle." He quenched a smaller dagger next, oil hissing. "Besides, I like the quiet. Daytime's full of people bowing." His faint grimace at that word tugged a smile from her. "They will bow less when they see you grime-streaked, hair plastered to your forehead like any apprentice." He laughed softly, and the sound dispelled the lingering chill. For a while she watched him draw steel from the coals, hammer ringing a slow cadence that matched her heartbeat. Time slipped, measured only by the gradual paling of stars, and the glow dancing on their faces. When the billet returned to blackness and Gendry set it aside to cool overnight, he hung the hammer on its peg, then surprised both of them by removing the torque from his neck. He held it out to her. "I fear ruining the finish with soot. Until I'm done." She studied the torque's dark shimmer. Valyrian steel laced with dragonglass veins, forged of ore smelted centuries apart, yet united in this singular band. Accepting it, she felt its weight anew, not heavy but potent, like a secret vow. "I will keep it safe." He nodded, lips parting as though he would speak further. Whatever words he considered, they died beneath a breath that frosted in the chill. Instead, he unrolled his sleeves and crossed to bank the coals, leaving her to cradle the torque in her palm. The metal felt warm, as though absorbing heat from their shared resolve. Before leaving, she touched his shoulder. He turned, surprise brightening his eyes. "Wear it proudly tomorrow," she said, "and allow yourself rest tonight. A blade can shatter if forged in exhaustion." "Manwin? So can a queen," he murmured, gaze flicking to the lavender smudges beneath her eyes. She drew back a slender fraction, unsettled by the protectiveness in his tone. "Queens are tempered by different fires." Gendry's answering smile was shy but steady. "Fire's fire, your grace. Even dragons need sleep." She inclined her head, conceding the point, and swept away before fatigue exposed the softness Tyrion warned her to guard. As she climbed the stone stair, she glanced once more at the forge. Gendry setting tools in order, coals subsiding. In that dim glow, she felt the pulse of new possibility quicken, the torque's warmth seeping through her glove to thrum at her wrist like a second heartbeat. She slept dreamless and awoke before dawn, roused by baying gulls. Grey Worm met her at the portico, stern and alert. The morning's council awaited, but not within Dragonstone's walls. Tyrion had suggested convening on the galley Seahawk to finalize the fleet's departure for Storm's End, arguing that salt spray focused minds as well as any draught of arbor red. By mid-morning, the Seahawk cut through choppy green, its square sails bellied with brisk wind. Daenerys stood near the prow, salt flecking her cheeks, Drogon gliding high overhead with regal tailing. Viserion stayed ashore to guard the castle and remind any opportunist that Dragonstone's mistress kept watch. Gendry joined her at the railing. Torque returned to its rightful place, gleaming like polished obsidian against sun-browned skin. He squinted at the horizon where a darker smear indicated incoming weather. Storm's End lies up to its name. Winds there curl around the headland like fists. "Master, fists can open into hands," she replied. "The bastion must welcome us. It will, if stone still remembers Baratheon voices." His knuckles drummed the rail. A smith's unconscious echo of hammer rhythm. But stone alone can't warn us of hidden knives. The Stormlands have seen Lannister envoys of late. Let them. She tipped her chin skyward, watching Drogon's vast shadow skate across the waves. If Cersei dares send spies south, Drogon's shadow will teach them humility. Gendry said nothing further, yet from the corner of her eye she saw him track the dragon with an expression lying somewhere between awe and responsibility. He was still measuring the weight of airship, she realized, testing its balance as a smith tested a blade's center of gravity. Below decks, Tyrion unrolled coastal charts atop a broad oak table, pinned with lead weights. Jon Snow bent over the parchment, his gloved fingertips sliding along inlets and shallows. The safest approach to Storm's End's cavernous seagate. Davos Seaworth, brought from White Harbor by Raven's summons, contributed intimate knowledge of the tide's treachery, his voice carrying salt-bitten authority that none questioned. Each time Daenerys leaned to study the markings, she felt Jon's nearness like a candle threatening to melt waxen resolve. Yet she forced herself to attend to the lines of defense and supply, rather than the storm of unspoken things stirring behind his gray eyes. Late afternoon found them gathered upon deck again, when lookout horns sounded. Sails off the port bow, crimson and gold. A Lannister banner, wind-snapped, crept over the horizon alongside smaller, nondescript ships. Too few for assault, too brazen for simple scouts. Tyrion's narrowed gaze flicked to Daenerys. A message from dear sister, no doubt. Jon's hand found the pommel of Longclaw. Or bait. Grey Worm signaled archers. Unsullied lined the bulwark with western bows notched. Daenerys raised her palm, halting them. The Lannister pennant struck as the ships drew closer, replaced by white cloth. Parley. Even so, she kept her dragons circling. No envoy whose life hung from a dragon's whim would offer insult. A gilded rowboat approached, its occupant cloaked in yellow samite. As he climbed the ladder onto deck, Daenerys recognized him. Sir Quentyn Bainafort, once in Tywin's retinue, now sworn to Cersei. He bowed with courtly grace that did not mask the tremor in his jaw, upon glimpsing Drogon's silhouette, blotting sun. "Queen Daenerys," he began, voice nasal but steady. "Her Majesty Cersei Lannister sends greetings and assurance that the Iron Throne values peace for the realm above all things. Tyrion snorted. Does she send her affection before or after she empties King's Landing's granaries to feed her golden company? Bainefort pretended deafness, continuing. To that end, Her Majesty proposes a parley at Blackwater Rush under banners of truce. She offers safe conduct and pledges no crossbow will be raised against dragon or man. Bah! Daenerys weighed the letter he presented. Parchment scented with myrrh, sealed in crimson wax, bearing the lion. She did not break it. Tell your queen the Dragon Queen negotiates only once her rightful seat is empty of usurpers. Sir Banefort's gaze darted to Gendry, whose torque caught a ray of late sun like a shard of obsidian lightning. Recognition widened the envoy's eyes. Is it true then, he whispered, that the Baratheon bastard stands named Targaryen Heir? Gendry answered not with words but by stepping forward, broad shoulders eclipsing Banefort's slender form. From his belt, he drew a fresh-forged dagger. Its blade straight, etched at the base with a crowned stag entwined about a three-headed dragon. He held it flat-palmed, offering the envoy a close view. Bainefort recoiled, suddenly pale. I forged this as token, Gendry said, voice low as thunder across a far valley. Take it to your queen so she may ponder whether old bloodlanes wield sharper steel than Sellsword's gold. Before Bainefort could refuse, Gendry closed the envoy's fingers around the hilt. The blade glinted hungry crimson. Bainefort jerked his hand back as if bitten. Daenerys sensed Lannister fears taking shape. Old rebellion's ghost resurrected, legitimized, now allied to dragons. The envoy swallowed, made a stiff bow, and fled. Within minutes, the rowboat receded, heading for the lion sigil mast, shrinking upon the horizon. Tyrion exhaled. Cersei will lose sleep over that dagger. Let her, Jon said. Then, turning to Gendry, he clasped the smith's wrist. Bold move, my friend. Only a warning, Gendry murmured. Better fear than blind hate. The Seahawk resumed her course. Evening skies bruised deeper. Wind snapped colder. Daenerys lingered beside Gendry at the prow, watching Banefort's sails vanish like candle flames snuffed by distance. You spoke well, she said, and proved yourself Baratheon in temper. I only forged truth. He inhaled sea air through parted lips. But truth alone won't win castles. No, she agreed, eyes narrowing at the smear of land emerging, a low silhouette of cliff and ruined battlements haloed by sea mist. We will need courage, loyalty, grain, and time, and before all else, trust. He tilted his head slightly. You have mine. Night settled thick, yet Storm's End loomed like a black mountain ahead, its drum tower rising from cliffs that broke waves into ragged foam. Lanterns flickered along the Seahawk's rails as the crew adjusted lines for the harbor's narrow throat. Rhaegal spiraled down, great wings beating salt into shimmering curtains. His roar split the dark, answered by booming thunder within the castle's hollow halls. Echoes, or perhaps memories. As they anchored, Daenerys felt the castle's ancient wards thrum beneath her soles. She disembarked first, boots crunching on coarse shingle, gray worm, and a wedge of unsullied fanning out. Jon strode at her left, Gendry at her right, torch held high. The sea gate yawned before them, a cavernous maw carved by storms into the cliff. Doors of oak banded in black iron hung half askew, swollen by brine, yet still stubbornly intact. Davos moved ahead, shouting greetings that bounced along the tunnel, until answered by tentative voices. Castellans who had kept hearth and hall for absentee lords, fearful but loyal to roofs overhead. Torches bloomed, revealing faces lined with sea spray wrinkles, eyes wide at the sight of dragons rippling overhead like living constellations. A grizzled steward, Cedric Storm by name, bent knee to Daenerys, though his gaze locked on Gendry. I served your father once, he rasped. King Robert. Gendry swallowed, throat working. You served well. Cedric's watery blue eyes glimmered. I served as I could. He drank deep, but loved us fierce. If his blood returns, we are yours. Tears pricked Gendry's vision. He blinked them away and helped the man to his feet. Daenerys watched that simple kindness ripple through the onlookers. Relief slackened tense shoulders. Already, the castle accepted its lost son and the Dragon Queen who brought him home. By dawn light they surveyed Storm's End's keep. Courtyards carpeted in wind-blown weed. Arrow slits clogged with gull nests. The roof of the bear pit collapsed into rubble where young weeds dared root. Yet the drum tower stood firm, its curtain walls thicker than any in Westeros. The hall's vaulted ceiling soared uncracked. It was a fortress needing care, not resurrection. Gendry moved from forge to forge like a carpenter greeting forlorn trees. The main smithy lay dark, ashes damp, tools once prized now rusting. He knelt, fingers brushing iron filings. "It can be saved," he whispered to Daenerys as she approached. A thorough cleaning, new bellows, half a dozen apprentices. He looked to Jon, who hovered at the doorframe. "Any northern lads willing to learn?" "Ay," Jon said. "Plenty seek trade away from war's front. Then we teach them." Gendry rose, eyes bright with purpose. Storm's End will ring with hammers again. That day became a blur of assignment. Grey Worm posted garrisons along wall walks. Davos oversaw stores inventory. Tyrion inspected cisterns, scribbling notes on water capacity. Daenerys divided her attention, yet ensured every soul received a word, a nod, a touch on the arm. She sensed the castle breathing easier by dusk, walls exhaling generations of neglect. Yet success bred jealousy. Spies surely lurked among laborers. She doubled the watch and ordered ravens to allies. New banners soon must fly. 2 nights after landing, a storm broke, lightning lashing towers, rain drumming the drum tower until water sluiced through arrow loops. Daenerys stood in the great hall's open doorway as gale-driven sheets blurred world to silver smear. Gendry approached, hair plastered, torch sputtering. "A wagon train arrived," he shouted above thunder. "Lead, charcoal, iron billets. All we requested, and faster than expected." "From whom?" "House Tarth, flown from Evenfall Hall. They pledged fealty and supplies." "Brienne of Tarth's home." Daenerys smiled, feeling cracks appear in the realm's edifice of fear. "Then tomorrow we thank them. Tonight, keep those billets dry." As he turned, lightning revealed his profile. Torque dazzling with captured fire, rainwater cascading in rivulets down his cheek. The sight filled her chest with warmth that rivaled dragon flame. She almost called after him, almost voiced the word son, but swallowed it, saving the moment for dawn. The storm raged. At midnight, alarm bells clanged. Daenerys snatched a cloak and raced toward the smithy where orange glow flickered too bright. Not forge fire, but sabotage. Flames licked rafters. Smoke rolled like wounded dragons. Across the courtyard silhouettes scuffled, unsullied locking spears with cloaked intruders. Steel rang. Drogon's roar battered the heavens. He swooped, scattering would-be assassins fleeing under crimson wings. Within the smithy Gendry battled 2 shadows armed with curved knives. In the firelight, his hammer blur met blades with dull clang, sparks showering. One attacker darted behind, but Gendry twisted, torque deflecting a slash aimed at his throat. Valyrian steel chipped the knife to scrap. He reversed grip and struck. The assassin crumpled. The second lunged in suicidal fury. Daenerys seized a discarded spear and thrust through the smoke, skewering him before he reached her heir. He fell thrashing. Ash and embers swirled. Gendry coughed, eyes watering, yet he gripped her forearm, steadying both. They tried to burn the forge. She surveyed blackened rafters. "Someone fears the weapons you build." Rain hissed through holes in roof, dampening flames. Unsullied dashed buckets, snuffing the rest. Grey Worm reported casualties. 4 assassins dead, 1 captured. Gendry knelt by the prisoner, who hissed curses in rough Bravasi, the Golden Company's tongue. Daenerys exchanged a grim look with Tyrion, arriving wind-soaked. "Cersei's coin," the dwarf murmured. They interrogated the captive in a cell damp, with salt seep. He confessed little beyond his contract. Strike before the forge rose to power. Daenerys left him to Grey Worm's vigilance and returned above, where Gendry assessed damage. Anvils stood scorched but intact, bellows charred, replaceable. The blade he'd been shaping lay buried beneath debris. He dug it out, steel unmarred. Rain-drummed patches of sky visible through the broken roof, washing soot from his arms and coppery blood from her spear. She touched his cheek, smudging ash. "You are unharmed." "Barely," he exhaled. Then, a wry grin. "Your spear work's decent, for a queen." She laughed despite fatigue. "I learned from Dothraki." Her smile faded. "They will strike again. Then we rebuild stronger each time." He lifted the battered blade, embers reflecting along its length. "Steel remembers the hammer, not the fire that tried to warp it." His words warmed her more than hearth. Together they oversaw repairs through pre-dawn darkness. By sunrise, new rafters had been raised, bellows replaced, and smiths stoked fresh coals. When first light gilded the blade Gendry finished quenching hours later, he offered it to her. A long sword slender as promise, etched with Valyrian glyphs meaning stormborn and sun. She accepted, feeling its balance hum along her bones. Around them, apprentices hammered, sparks cascaded, and the roar of forges joined gull cries in a dawn anthem proclaiming life. Weeks unfurled. Storm's End bustled like a wounded beast returning to health. Masons chiseling seawalls, farmers driving wagons heavy with barley to new granaries. Fisherfolk mending deep-sea nets for fleets needing sustenance. Grey Worm drilled joint cohorts of Unsullied and Baratheon levies. Davos organized coastal beacons. Word spread along trade routes. The Dragon Queen and Baratheon Heir fortified the Stormlands together. Small councils convened nightly in the hall. Strategies against Cersei's sellsword legions, negotiations with Blackwood, Tarth, and a wary Hightower envoy. Through it all, Gendry sat beside Daenerys at the long table, torque gleaming. He spoke rarely, preferring to listen. But when he did speak, his plain observations bore the ring of true coin. How to allocate iron stockpiles. How many archers could be outfitted per wagon of goose feathers. Whether to conscript local stonemasons or bring foreign engineers from Myr. His quiet authority grew until lords twice his age deferred to the bastard smith, with calloused palms and Valyrian collar. One crisp evening, after the council dispersed, Daenerys remained, fingering the sword's pommel carved into twin sigils. Across the table Gendry lingered, rolling a strip of fine leather between his fingers. Candlelight gilded his hair, fanned shadows across high cheekbones. "I crafted a sheath," he said at last, sliding the leather to her. Stormland stag hide, lined with red silk for Targaryen blood. It protects the blade from salt air. She traced the supple surface. "Thank you." He hesitated, eyes softened. "There is something else." Her brows arched. "When I first called you mother, half a slip of the tongue, I feared I'd presumed too much. But these weeks have shown me." He exhaled. Shoulders squared. "I wish to earn that word, fully." Emotion rose, a tide surging so swift it threatened her composure. She set the sheath down carefully. "You need earn nothing more. The name is a gift freely bestowed as you are upon me." Gendry's gaze wavered with sudden moisture he did not hide. "Then hear me pledge. I will not forsake the small folk who suffer in this realm. If I inherit, I'll stand for them first." She rose, circled the table, and placed her hand over the torque's cool metal. "We will stand for them together, my son." The declaration sealed itself in the hush that followed. No ceremony, no witnesses, only the creak of rafters and a distant crash of surf. Yet in that hush, Daenerys felt age-old divisions knit another seam. She thought of Viserys, crown drowned in molten gold. Of Rhaegar, corpse upon the trident. Their ghosts drifted farther now, making room for this living bond. Out beyond the walls, campfires dotted hills like ember constellations. Somewhere across those rolling darks Jon Snow walked the ramparts with Ghost at his side, contemplating the Night King's growing shadow. Battle drums still awaited, winter sharpened its breath, and Cersei sharpened blades of gold. But Daenerys Stormborn, mother of dragons, breaker of chains, now held in her, keeping a son whose hammer sang of unity and hope. She guided Gendry to the balcony overlooking storm-tossed sea. Lightning flickered far off, outlining Drogon coasting upon thermals like a barbed moon. Rain threatened again, yet the air between Queen and Heir felt warm as late summer. "Storms will test us," she said. "They always do. But storms shape the cliffs that guard this castle. Let them shape us also." Gendry leaned upon the stone, salt wind whipping his hair. "Ay," he murmured. Storms reveal the steel beneath. Below, waves smashed rock, withdrew, smashed again. An endless forging. In their roar she heard the heartbeat of a realm not yet lost. She placed one hand atop Gendry's, fingers interlacing, and together they watched lightning lace distant clouds, each jagged vein illuminating sea and sky and the unbroken walls of Storm's End. The night brimmed with tumult, yet at its center stood two figures forged anew. Dragon and stag, mother and son, tempered by fire, bound by choice, awaiting dawn's next hammer stroke upon the anvil of the world. Ka. A sharp autumn chill settled over Storm's End in the days that followed the attempted sabotage. The sea hurled white-maned breakers at the castle's knees, and mists crept inland to blur the hedgerows and low stone walls that lined the storm coast. Hard-eyed sentries paced the battlements at dawn, breath smoking in the air. Their cloaks snapped like lances, and the newly repainted banners, dragon and crowned stag twined on sable, sighed restlessly overhead. Tension rippled beneath every routine. A hush in the kitchens when knives rang upon cutting boards. A wary tilt of lanterns in the tunnels where unsullied patrols met Stormlander recruits. Though the forge once more rang bright, the memory of assassins' blades lingered like a bruise on the realm's throat. Daenerys felt the unease most keenly in the Great Hall, whose soaring vault now echoed with the counsels of two wars. Jon Snow's dire warnings of the night King's march south filled one half the maps. Tyrion's meticulous notes on Cersei's maneuvers filled the other. Between those twin calamities, a single bright thread wove. Gendry's presence at her left hand, torque gleaming, voice calm as hammered steel. He spoke rarely but with certainty, anchoring the strategy and practicalities. Shipyards, grain tributes, the pace of rebuilding the tumbled parapets. Each update stitched the lords of the Stormlands tighter into allegiance, and the once skeptical stewards now bowed to the bastard smith with open respect. Yet beneath that growing authority, Daenerys sensed a storm of his own. Restlessness that made him rise before sunrise, hammering out spearheads while most still slept. A brooding gaze cast toward the northwestern horizon, where gray clouds massed like mailed giants. When she asked, he claimed only vigor, but she recognized the forge of worry. She resolved to temper that unease as carefully as he tempered steel. One frost-rimmed morning, as violet dawn bled behind the drum tower, she descended the narrow spiral to the courtyard with a purpose shaped in secrecy. The stones beneath her felt alive with cold. Stars clung to the last darkness overhead. She crossed the yard unseen, save for a pair of squire boys dousing torches, and slipped into the forge just as Gendry set the first billet to glow. Sparks burst, painting ridges of muscle on his forearm gold, and the anvil's ring cracked the hush like distant thunder. He looked up, startled. Soot streaked across his cheek. "You'll spoil your cloak, mother." She shed the sable mantle and draped it over a hook, stepping into the orange glow. "Then I'll warm it in the fire you build." She lifted a small wrapped bundle from beneath her arm and unrolled it on the workbench. A lump of matte stone shot with milky veins, no larger than a clenched fist. "Dragon glass from Dragonstunda's deep pits," she said. "Gifted by the hill diggers for your blades." His eyes widened. "I've never worked obsidian. It chips like glass, they say. Yet it slays the dead." She met his gaze. "When we ride north, every sword we carry must speak the language of fire and ice." He turned the stone in calloused fingers, weighing its promise. "It fractures under a hammer," he murmured. "But if I heat it right, maybe inlay a steel spine behind the edge." She watched him weigh possibilities, mind already shaping the impossible into form. "Will you teach your apprentices?" she asked. "Every technique," he vowed. "We'll need hundreds of arrowheads, spear points, daggers small enough to hide in the sleeve. I'll start with this piece. A gust rattled the shutters. Beyond, the first pale bands of sunlight isolated her dragons on the sky like primordial runes. She drew closer, voice softening. You look north even in sleep. Tell me why. He set the stone down and leaned his hammer against the bench. Because winter marches without regard for thrones. Because men who have naught but the warmth of a forge between them and death understand what's coming better than lords who dine by candlelight. I know what it is to freeze on a riverbank, alone, praying for a spark you cannot kindle. I won't let that happen to the souls under our banners. No. She touched his arm. Nor will I. I have dragons, yes. But even dragonfire is only one hearth in a world of need. Your forge is another. She turned his hand upward, studying the half-healed cut across his palm left by the assassin's blade. Yet you cannot heat every hearth alone. Gendry closed his fingers around hers. Give me time. I'll teach 100 smiths to split stone and steel. We'll send blades north on every road. Time, she reflected, thinned each day by war and winter. Still, she nodded. Then grant me a lesson. She lifted a slender bar of iron from the rack. Show me the first stroke. Surprise flickered, then softened into a grin. Your grip's wrong. He shifted her fingers, guiding the bar to the anvil's face. Hold the tongs like reins, firm, but not strangling. He positioned her elbow. Raise the hammer to your shoulder, fall with the weight. Let the metal feel the shape rather than forcing it. Together they hammered the bar yellow, tapering one end to a leaf-thin edge. Sweat beaded on her brow despite the chill. Her arms trembled yet refused to yield. Sparks hissed against her boots. When at last the iron dulled to black and the hum of power drained from her bones, she plunged the piece into water. Steam kissed her cheeks. The iron hardened with a hiss as satisfying as dragon wings slicing air. Gendry removed the blade from the quench and held it before her, wobbly, lopsided, yet undeniably shaped by her own hand. He bowed his head over it. A queen's blade. She laughed, the sound bright. A queen's crooked letter opener, perhaps. Even a crooked blade cuts, he countered, and the pride in his voice warmed her. Later that afternoon, Jon Snow left the rampart walk and found Daenerys pacing the gallery that overlooked the hollow drum of Storm's End's central courtyard. He sensed the simmer still dancing beneath her skin. Some mixture of exhilaration and weariness, and his brow furrowed. Ravens arrived from Winterfell, he said. Sansa writes that the first flurries swirl beyond the last river. We have a moon, maybe two, before snows choke the neck. She paused, palms gripping the stair rail so firmly veins showed pale. Then we leave sooner. I worry you push too hard. He studied the smudge of soot still lingering on her cheek. When fire runs thin, it dies. She brushed dust from her sleeve. I cannot wait for perfect strength. The dead want. Jon tilted his head. Stannis Baratheon said something like that once. He died in snowdrifts all the same. I am not Stannis. She inhaled slowly. When I flew from Meereen, I learned that flight alone cannot win wars, but it can shape them. I intend to shape what comes. Jon accepted that with a nod, though worry shadowed his eyes. Sansa also writes that the Vale Knights ride south if the Aerys lords can be persuaded. Lord Royce hesitates. Littlefinger once guided him, she said, distaste curling the name. We will convince him another way. How? Her gaze drifted downward, to the courtyard where Gendry's apprentices ferried bundles of dragonglass to a stockpile beneath burlap tarps. Joan's eyes followed. Understanding dawned. A Baratheon heir petitioning the Vale for aid, he whispered. The Arryns once sheltered Robert. She nodded. And hammered halls remember old loves. She faced him fully. Ride with Gendry. Take Rhaegal for a demonstration of might. Convince Lord Royce that dead men do not care about ancient grudges. If we secure the Vale, we anchor the east flank for the march north. Jon hesitated only a heartbeat. I will. 2 dawns later, the castle's population rose before the sun died out. In the wide lawn south of the main gate, Rhaegal crouched beneath his mother's watchful gaze, saddle straps checked thrice by Dothraki handlers. Jon climbed molten black rigging, Ghost pacing below with uneasy huffs. Gendry stood beside the dragon, helmed in boiled leather trimmed with bronze, torque shining above the gorget. He wore no sword, only a new warhammer, 8-pound head of hardened steel rimmed with obsidian shards, the haft wrapped in stahhide. One side bore the crowned stag, the other the 3-headed dragon. Daenerys had watched him forge the hammer through 3 nights of tireless hammering, and she felt its weight now in the air as though it were forged from gravity rather than iron. She stepped forward. "Storm's End gives you both its strength," she said. "Return with the veils, and Winter's spear may miss its mark." Gendry bowed to his knee, not as a vassal, but as a son pledging duty. "By hammer and hearth," he vowed. Jon swung astride Rhaegal. Leather creaked, the dragon's green-gold eyes blinking like twin suns. Snow-cold wind curled around the trio as Daenerys lifted a hand. Rhaegal answered with a trumpet roar and flung himself skyward, wings beating thunder. Ghost barked, then loped to the outer wall to follow their shadow along the ramparts. Gendry mounted a fresh Stormlander courser and cantered through the gatehouse behind the dragon's tailwind, a small retinue of mounted archers at his back. Their dust settled. Daenerys remained on the field until the last fleck of green vanished into low clouds. Only then did she turn, meeting Tyrion's silent gaze across the courtyard. The hand of the queen tapped his parchment roll against his palm. Brows knit. "You have parted with both your hammer and your sword," he observed. "Jon and Gendry at once. To what end?" "To shape 2 fronts at once," she replied. "And who tempers the temper while they are gone?" She smiled faintly. "I have you." He bowed with ironic flourish. "Then let us temper new alliances here. Yon Royce is stubborn. Yet so is the Lord of Tarth, and he has arrived with blue banners flying. Brienne rides at his flank, tall as a tower. They claim safe conduct to treat." Daenerys' pulse quickened, not from fear but anticipation. "Then today we hammer 2 more links." She met Lord Selwyn Tarth in the solar above the windy Bailey. The even star's weathered face belied the calm of seas between storms. His hair, silver as wave foam, hung past his shoulders, and his eyes retained a young man's directness. At his side stood Sir Brienne, broad-shouldered, in gleaming sapphire armor. Sword Oathkeeper belted at her hip. When Daenerys entered, a hush settled, heightened by Drogon's shadow passing over the windows like a slow eclipse. Lord Selwyn bowed respectfully. "Your Grace, the last dragon I greeted belonged to Queen Rhaenys, and set Evenfall's docks alight. I pray your visit ends more gently." "Meteran." "Dragons answer to the hearts that guide them," Daenerys replied. "I come not to burn, but to forge an oath of living steel." They spoke of the Night King, of the Lion Queen, of starving fisherfolk along the summer sea. Selwyn listened, his gaze often drifting to the torque at Daenerys' collar, simpler than a crown yet more imposing in its stark certainty. Brienne contributed little until mention of Gendry's adoption. Her blue eyes shone with unshed tears of relief. "I rode with him on Blackwater once," Brienne said, voice deep as drums. "He saved my life with a dagger of cheap iron. If he forges steel for the realm now, I will follow." Selwyn laid a weather-cracked hand upon his daughter's gauntlet. "Evenfall Hall has ships, sailors hardened by squalls colder than any Lannister breeze. If you call us, we sail." Daenerys reached across the map and clasped his wrist. "Then I call." That night, a feast blazed beneath Storm's End's high vault. Salted cod and barley stews, saffron crab drawn from bright traps offshore, and barrels of Dornish red courtesy of a smuggler ship that Davos escorted into harbor with a wink and a threat. Minstrels strummed Stormwood lutes, and the hearth's flames leapt high under Drogon's occasional low growl from beyond the broken lancet window, like an admonition to revel responsibly. Amid laughter and clatter, Daenerys withdrew to the balcony walkway, seeking quiet. Rain had ceased, stars shivered bright above receding clouds. She wrapped arms about herself, savoring the keen bite of sea salt air. Below, the tide hissed, sucking at the cliff base. Tyrion joined her, a goblet in each hand. I brought the arbor red you pretended not to want, he said, offering one. A queen needs indulgence, else she forgets what she fights for. She accepted, sipping. And what do I fight for, Lord Tyrion? For mornings you look upon such a sky and see more than ash. He leaned on the parapet. For a world where sons of bastards become heirs, and queens learn to swing hammers. She smiled into the night. And what of you? What draws the dwarf prince of wine into frozen wars? No. Bar. Debt, he said lightly. To my conscience, to my murdered brother. To every book that told me good kingship was possible. And perhaps, he raised his cup in salute. The chance to stand beside a ruler who might prove those pages true. His earnestness touched her. They drank, silent a while. From the hall a cheer rose. Brienne's bass laugh rolled like distant thunder. Daenerys breathed deep. I miss them. Jon and Gendry. Both. Each carries a thread of this fate. If one frays... Tyrion's eyes softened. You've grown used to many weights at once. Trust the knots you tied. She nodded, though worry fluttered still. Somewhere far across the Vale's high moors, her heir and her... what name now for Jon? Friend. Ally. Promise neither dare name. Rode into uncertain hearts. Snow flurries dusted the stony slopes of the giant's lance, as Rhaegal glided beneath low cloud. Jon's black cloak, streaming behind like a tattered standard. Below, goat paths coiled among frost-gray boulders, and the Erie's pale walls shimmered atop impossible heights. Gendry's retinue, reduced to a handful of riders by the cruel switchbacks, wound upward toward the bloody gate. Jon circled thrice, then guided Rhaegal down to a meadow near a crooked pine where Gendry waited. The smith dismounted stiff-legged, cursing the bite of altitude. He lifted his hammer, knuckles aching. Feels like the sky itself shoves you here. Jon dismounted as well, Rhaegal huffing steam. The Arryns built their pride on thin air. Makes them think they're closer to gods. Let's remind them men bleed the same at any height, Gendry muttered. They approached the bloody gate side by side. The massive portcullis bristled with pikes. Within the narrow cleft stood bronze armor shining beneath snow-seared torches. Jan Royce emerged, cloaked in sable and green. His beard lay stiff with frost, eyes sharp as the mountain winds. Royce regarded Gendry first. You wear no stag upon your breast, lad. Gendry unclasped the wolf fur. Half-cape draped about his shoulders, revealing the tor. Stag enough, he answered. He extended his hammered warhammer for inspection. Royce gripped it, his eyebrows rose at the weight. And dragon? Royce murmured, tracing the three-headed crest. I served under your father's banner against the Greyjoys. He swung a hammer near your size. He returned it. But the heir of Storm's End comes unannounced to my door. Why? Jon stepped forward. Because winter walks, my lord. And it cares nothing for mountain passes. Royce studied the man once called a bastard Stark, now king in the north by acclamation. We received your crow's message, Snow. White shadows, armies of ice, tales out of children's fever dreams. Dreams kill when ignored, Jon growled. He turned, gesturing skyward. Rhaegal launched, wings slamming thunder, flame-licking cusp. Royce's men recoiled beneath the dragon's furnace roar as blue-white fire lit cliff faces. When silence fell again, snowflakes drifted like ash. Gendry looked back to Royce. That's one dragon. There are three, and they will fight for life. Will the Vale? The old knight's jaw clenched. The Vale stands for Westeros. Then ride with us, Jon pressed. We march soon. My sister cannot hold the neck alone. Royce considered, inhaling the thin air. At last he uttered a slow breath. The Arryn banners will fly if the Lady Sansa Stark requests our swords. He met Jon's eyes. And if the Baratheon heir swears the Vale shall remain unmolested by dragon's fire. Gendry's shoulders squared. By the hammer of Robert I swear. No flame touches your stones save winter's hearth. Royce nodded once, then passed the gate. Inside, the Erie's wind-scoured halls welcomed them with mountain chill. Gendry delivered Daenerys' letter, sealed with both sigils. Maester Coleman transcribed copies for the Knights of the Gates of the Moon. That night, they broke bread in a high chamber, whose windows revealed a tempest of snow, swirling in moonlight. Jon and Gendry spoke alternately of dragonglass caches, of Hardhome's horror, of the Night King's wordless silence beneath swirling storm. Royce's grim skepticism melted like ice in a smithy fire. At dawn he clasped arms with them atop the moon bridge. 10,000 knights ride when the pass is clear, he promised, and we'll bring stonemasons skilled at building walls upon walls. Jon exhaled relief. Gendry smiled, then grasped their host's forearm. You have saved far more than walls, my lord. 2 days later, they soared south, message ravens streaking ahead. At Storm's End, Daenerys stood on the seaward rampart as sunlight pierced gray skies. The tide lay low, exposing black, glinting reefs. From the east rode a lean figure on a piebald horse, cloak snapping blue and white. A courier blew a horn. She watched his approach, heart thudding. Either disaster or victory galloped beneath that banner. The courier dismounted breathless and knelt. Ravens from the Eyrie, your grace. Lord Jon Royce swears fealty. 10,000 knights ride at first thaw.b. Dantarhar. She unfurled the parchment, eyes dancing over inked oaths. Relief washed through her, and she whispered a silent thanks to the absent horsemen who were in this windfall. Tyrion joined her, wine forgotten. He scanned the letter, grin widening. 2 kingdoms now flock behind your fire. Even Cersei's coffers cannot buy loyalty so earned. Daenerys gripped the rampart edge. We march north soon. But first, we must crown Storm's End anew. Crown? Tyrion echoed. Gendry returns as heir in truth. The people must see it. She turned fierce eyes inland. Gather the lords for a moot, tonight. Tyrion bowed. The queen commands. Preparations sparked through the castle like wildfire. Though this time the flames bore hope, not murder. Tapestries aired, banners rehung, hearths stoked. Gendry's apprentices polished helms until they mirrored torchlight. Seamstresses embroidered new tabards, bearing stag and dragon entwined. Grey Worm drilled honor guards on the east lawn, spears gleaming like pine needles in frost. When Rhaegal's shadow finally swept across the bailey, herald horns blared. Men and women spilled from workshops and barracks to witness the dragon spiral down, wings buffeting wind through the courtyard. Snow dust slipped from Rhaegal's scales as he landed. Jon slid free, cloak swirling. Gendry dismounted shortly after, hammer slung across his back. He looked thinner, cheeks wind-burnt, but his smile blazed as he spotted Daenerys descending the stair in silver-blue battle surcoat. She halted at the foot, heart thudding. He strode forward, torque flashing, and sank to one knee, bowing head. "Mother," he said simply. She laid a hand on his hair, fingers trembling. "Rise, my son." A hush swept the square. Jon watched, lips curving in silent gratitude. Brienne stepped from the throng, hand upon Oathkeeper's pommel, eyes shining. Tyrion cleared his throat from atop a half-finished dais. "Lords and ladies, small folk and smiths, behold Gendry of houses Baratheon and Targaryen, 21st of his name, heir to Dragonstone and Storm's End, protector of Hammer and Flame." Thunderous cheers rolled like surf. Gendry straightened. Daenerys pressed a circlet to his brow, bronze forged into antlers spiraling into dragon wings. He grasped her wrist to steady the crown, and their joint silhouette blazed in torchlight. A new crest wrought in flesh. The feast that followed eclipsed all prior revels. Barrels of spiced ale from Gulltown, smoked mutton basted in honey, pies of trout and bacon braided in flaky crust. Minstrels sang the Hammer and the Dragon, a tune penned that afternoon by 2 Stormlander bards bristling with pride. Daenerys danced once with Grey Worm, his solemn discomfort softened by Missandei's laughter, and once, clandestinely, with Jon among pillars where firelight dappled stone like autumn leaves. In that stolen circuit, his hand at her waist felt like the axis of the turning year. After, she slipped away, longing for quiet. She found Gendry on the rampart facing the endless dark sea, crown removed, torque catching starlight. He gripped his hammer, knuckles white. She stood beside him. Too heavy already? He exhaled. Not the crown. The silence between beats. I keep hearing every sound we must yet shield the realm from. War horns beyond Winterfell, the screech of undead, the hiss of wildfire beneath King's Landing. She laid her forearm along the stone parapet. Listen closer. Below, surf pounded. In the distance, a smithy's hammer rang even at this hour, shaping arrowheads. Horses stamped in stables, laughter trickled from windows. An infant cried somewhere in the stonemasons' cottages. That is what we protect. He closed his eyes, letting the sounds fill him. Will I be enough? She leaned closer, shoulder brushing his. A forge only begins the blade. The wielder decides the cut. We decide together. He lifted the hammer, letting moonlight silver its obsidian inlay. Then decide the first blow. She considered the obsidian shards embedded like frozen tears. We ride north in 3 weeks, she said. But before that, Storm's End must become a beacon. I will speak to the lords tomorrow. You will speak to their sons and daughters. Teach them to split dragonglass. Teach them the songs of hammers. Plant forges in every holdfast. He nodded. The Stormlands will blaze like anvils. And the dragons, she continued, will carry those blades across rivers, past ruined holds, into the hands of every house that still draws breath. Wind gusted hard, whipping her braid across her cheek. Gendry secured the hammer at his belt, then plucked a strand of silver hair dislodged into the air. He wound it around his gauntlet's finger, studying the filament. When snow buries us, will dragonfire melt it? Some, she said. But hearts must burn brighter. He released the strand. It fluttered away, caught by wind, vanishing into starlit void. Then let's feed the fires. Snowflakes, salt flakes from the sea's foam, touched her lips. She breathed their sting and lifted her face to the constellations. Cassiopeia shimmered above, the queen enthroned upon sky. She turned back to Gendry. Rest tonight. Tomorrow we hammer dawn itself. Lightning forked far out at sea, silent and pale. For an instant, its ghost-white glare etched Storm's End upon the horizon. Towers solid, walls unyielding, beacons ablaze, and atop the highest parapet, a dragon unfurling its wings beside a crowned smith in antlered bronze. In that frozen moment, the Stormlands looked invincible. And still, the world turned. A fortnight later, the first argent fingers of winter crept even into the Stormlands' mild bays. Frost crusted the ramparts each dawn, well water-iced at the edges. Ravens beat constant paths, from Winterfell, from River Run, from High Garden's besieged keep now bristling with Lannister pikes. Cersei's Golden Company marched west to Harrenhal, yet her galleys lingered near Sunspear, uncertain whether to guard the capital or strike at Storm's End once more. Inside the forge, Gendry presided over an army of apprentices. Bellows roared, hammers crashed, sparks fountained. Dragonglass arrowheads piled in crates, shimmering black teeth bound for the wall. Even Brienne shed armor and took chisel in hand to carve obsidian knives with a surgeon's precision. Daenerys walked among them daily, offering water, praising form, raising morale by mere presence. She bled her own palm once when a shard splintered. Gendry bound it himself, muttering that the stone wished to taste Queen's blood and know it stood for life. She laughed, though quietly wondered whether some deeper magic drank that drop. On the 15th morning, horns cried from the high cliffs. A Lannister fleet, 12 galleys, rounded the Cape of Wrath under lion banners. Tyrion strode into the council chamber, parchment still wet with sea spray. Cersei tests the shield. Daenerys summoned Grey Worm, Davos, Brienne, half the Unsullied, and 2 dragons. She left Gendry behind. The forge must not fall. Yet his protest followed her down the stair like a hammer clang. We need every blade, she said, squeezing his shoulder. Hold the heart. He watched her mount Drogon, eyes storm dark. Bring them home, he called over the roar of wings. At sea, Wildfire arrows streaked sky green. Sails burned in hissing explosions as Drogon answered with red-gold flame. Rhaegal swooped, claws rending masts. Grey Worm's ballistae launched from upgraded ramparts, skewering hulls with iron bolts tipped in dragonglass. An experiment proving lethal to men as to wights. Davos-picked archers raked decks with flaming pitch, and waves boiled under the rain of ember. Within an hour, 6 galleys sank. 4 fled westward ablaze. 2 ran aground on shoals. Crews scrambling onto jagged rocks only to meet swords of Stormlander shore. Patrols led by Brienne. By dusk, Cersei's probe lay drowned beneath purple waves, and the dragons circled triumphant above crimson-lit surf. Daenerys landed upon the beach where wreckage smoldered. She strode across blackened sand, armor streaked in soot, crownless but radiant in victory's heat. Brienne saluted. Davos whistled low. Grey Worm shunted prisoners into makeshift pens. Among the captives, one man stood apart. Commander Carl Hightower, a distant cousin to Old Town's ruling blood, captured with sword still in hand. He met Daenerys' gaze unflinching. "You burn all who differ," he said. She regarded his lion crest breastplate. "I burn those who would chain a realm for spite." He spat blood into sand. Every queen claims mercy hovers in her palm, until she closes her fist. Daenerys' jaw tightened. She motioned Grey Worm aside and knelt before the prisoner. "My fist holds no mercy, only justice. Tell Cersei Lannister. Next time she sends iron to test my walls, my dragons will test the Red Keep." Carl Hightower's laughter cracked ribs. "I am sworn never to return if I fail." "Then send the message on your corpse," she said coldly. She rose, leaving him to unsullied guards. Blood still hissed on charred sand. Gulls circled, screeching. Winter's breath whistled off the sea, heavy with salt and smoke. When she returned to Storm's End well past midnight, Gendry met her at the inner gate, torch in hand. She shivered, not from cold but from the echo of Wildfire's screams. He took her gauntleted hands, heat radiating from his own as though he had never left the forge. "You won," he murmured. "I survived," she corrected. "Winning grows more costly." He brushed ash from her cheek with a thumb. "Then let each win count for 10. She leaned into the touch, allowing her eyes to close. "I needed that flame tonight," she admitted, "to remind me the Red Keep is not yet ash." "It will be," Gendry whispered, "but only when its fall saves more lives than it ends." She opened her eyes, seeing her own weariness mirrored in his. Their breaths mingled, warm clouds dissolving into night. In a distant chamber, a baby wailed. Alive, because walls held. Somewhere above, Drogon rumbled, settling upon the roof like a slumbering cathedral. "Come," Gendry said softly. "The fire's banked. I kept it waiting." They walked together to the forge. The heat inside was gentle, embers pulsing red like the heart of the castle. He poured water into a clay basin. She cupped her hands, drinking gratefully. He removed her gauntlets, inspected burns, applied salve smelling of lavender and pine. She let him. At last, he retrieved a bundle wrapped in oilcloth from the shadowed corner. "I finished while you battled." He unrolled it across the anvil. 3 throwing daggers, obsidian blades set into steel tangs etched with swirling waves. "For Arya Stark," he said. "She walks faster than death itself." "These should suit her dance." Daenerys traced a finger along one blade's edge. "They weigh nothing." "Speed conquers," he murmured. "Send them north with the next raven." She nodded, then lifted her gaze. "And the sword for me?" He smiled. "Tomorrow, tonight, rest." She obeyed. The forge bench, strewn with hides, became her seat. The glow of embers painted the walls in restful amber. Gendry returned to the steady rhythm of a whetstone whispering along steel. Sparks spat gently, sizzling on the damp sand at his feet. Outside, Storm's End slept beneath fresh fractures of frost. Inside, Queen and Heir shared fire and silence, the sort of silence that seals bargains beyond language. Dawn would demand again councils, ravens, blades to haunt. But for this narrow wedge of night, The war paused around an anvil, where two hearts hammered in tender accord. 3 weeks later, the muster began in earnest. Columns of horse rolled west from Evenfall, swan banners streaming. From the Trident poured Blackwood levies and fisherfolk archers. The Vale's knights, bright as cold stars, lined the coastal road in 10 abreast. Squires gaped at dragons roosting on broken ramparts. Sellswords pressed hands to hearts at the sound of unsullied marching cadence. Storm's End's massive yard became a sea of tents and cook fires. Grain wagons groaned beneath winter stores. The forge ran night and day. The scent of oil and singed leather drifted like incense. Gendry, Jon, and Daenerys stood on the parapet, surveying the tide of humanity converging upon them. Jon's breath ghosted as he spoke. "We march in 7 days. Sansa signals the neck still passable, but ice thickens. So 7 days, Daenerys echoed, feeling the weight clamp tight across her ribs. Gendry planted his hammer's butt against the stone. Then the blades are ready. The men only need purpose. Purpose, she murmured. She watched a squad of Stormlanders kneel to tug boots tighter, faces set with a mixture of awe and dread. I must speak to them. That evening, as a red sun bled into the sea, Daenerys ascended the broad steps of the half-repaired drum tower. The yard below seethed with lords and commoners, a teeming patchwork of colors and crests lit by torches. Jon stood near the base, ghost flanking. Gendry climbed the opposite stair to where the great war gong hung. At his cue, he lifted a padded mallet and struck. Boom! The gong's voice shuddered through stone and bone. Every head turned upward. A hush-like vacuum settled. Daenerys stepped to the parapet, wind streaming her pale hair. No crown weighed her brow. Only the torque of interwoven dragonglass and steel. She raised her hands. People of the Stormlands, people of the Vale, of the Riverlands, of the Reach. Her voice, amplified by spells woven into the stone long ago, carried across the yard. You have come seeking fire against the night. I will not give you comfortable lies. The darkness we face drains light from the very blood. It is a darkness that wears no banner and yields to no ransom. Faces lifted, firelight dancing in widened eyes. I was born amid storm and salt, she continued. I was forged in exile, in desert, in furnace cities where masters named men property. I broke chains then, as I will break death's now, but I cannot break it alone. Every hammer stroke from our forge, every arrow tipped in the glass of dragonstone, every heartbeat standing with courage adds to the fire that will light the world's last night. Medine. She paused, allowing the hush to deepen. We march not to burn the north, but to save it. We march not for a crown, but for life. When death rises, it will meet Storm's End in every sword you raise. And when spring returns, when children plant seed in thawed soil, the world will remember that in its darkest hour, men and women stood together under 2 sigils joined, dragon and stag. Then, a murmur swelled into cheers. Steel clanged on shields, banners lifted. Gendry struck the gong again, its bronze howl rolling like thunder through ribs. Jon raised Longclaw, its pale blade catching last light. Ghost howled. Above, Drogon answered with a roar that shook the ramparts. Daenerys looked down at her heir. Gendry held the mallet steady, eyes brimmed with fierce pride. He nodded up at her. In that nod she found unspoken vows. To forge until his arms failed, to hammer hope from despair. The courtyard erupted, chants of storm, chants of fire. Shoes stomped, lances rattled. The tremor vibrated through stone, into the drum tower, into her bones. She raised both fists, and the roar swelled. That night, the campfires burned brighter than any prior. Soldiers told stories under quilts of sparks. Maesters recorded new verses. Dothraki riders laughed at Vale Knight's meticulous oaths. Daenerys walked among them until dawn tinged the horizon. She listened, encouraged, accepted shy offerings of carved trinkets, meant as luck charms. She watched Jon teach a green recruit to hold a spear, his patience unfeigned. She saw Gendry coax a scrawny boy to swing a hammer, praising each fumbling strike as though it sang. When the sun finally crowned the sea, she found herself upon the east wall again. Gendry approached, hair tousled, smile weary but content. He held a wrapped bundle. "For you," he said. Inside lay a sword of dragonglass edge fused along Valyrian steel core, black and silver twisting like night and dawn. The grip was stag hide braided with crimson silk. Her breath caught. "It won't shatter," Gendry said quietly. "I folded steel around the glass until they became one metal." She drew the blade free, testing balance. It sang. A thrill raced along her arm. "What name?" "You name it," he answered. "A sword chooses meaning by deeds." She considered. "Stormbringer," she said at last. "Appropriate," he smiled. They stood a moment in sunrise's hush. Then horns blared. Riders from Winterfell arrived, bearing urgent dispatch. Jon hurried up the stair. Sansa's seal broke beneath trembling fingers. His face paled. "The wall has fallen," he rasped. "The dead march on Winterfell." Silence ruptured across the rampart. Gendry's hammerhead lowered. Daenerys' heart punched her ribs. She felt the sky shrink, frostbite deeper. "How long?" she whispered. "Days," Jon answered. "No more." She closed fist around Stormbringer's hilt, knuckles whitening. "Then we march now." Gendry exhaled. "The men. Ready." She turned to him, eyes blazing. "Forge rides with us. Each apprentice packs what they can carry. The rest stays. Storm's End will guard the realm's southern throat." And Jon stepped closer, meeting her gaze. "Eagle can fly me ahead to Winterfell. It may buy hours." She nodded once. "Go. Tell Sansa the dragon and the hammer follow." He clasped her arm. Ghost pressed muzzle to her gauntlet. Then he sprinted down the stair, cloak flaring. Minutes later, Rhaegal's green wings cleaved the sky, bearing him northward faster than ravens. Daenerys watched his dwindling shape until it vanished beyond low clouds. She turned to Gendry. "Sound the forges. Night ends tonight." He tightened the torque at his throat. "And dawn begins beneath our hammers." They descended side by side, footfalls ringing. In the distance, the camp's bustle intensified. Tents struck, armor donned, banners unfurled in the brisk wind. Dragons roared overhead, sensing the pulse of war shift from future to present. Storm's End's gates opened. Columns of spearmen streamed out, hooves clattering on frost. Cart after cart of dragonglass rattled along, escorted by archers clothed in patchwork sigils. At the head rode Daenerys Stormborn, Stormbringer strapped across her back, Drogon's shadow swirling above. At her right rode Gendry Baratheon Targaryen, hammer balanced across his saddle, antlers of bronze glinting in winter sun. They did not look back. Beyond the headland, the march north unfurled in a ribbon of steel and hope. Dragons above, forges behind, and a horizon rimmed in gathering snow clouds. Somewhere out there, the Night King lifted a hand, and corpses stirred. Somewhere out there, Cersei weighed which betrayal served her crown best. But on this day, the hammer rang louder than fear, and the dragon burned fiercer than doubt, and two hearts, mother and son, stag and dragon, beat as a single anvil stroke, poised to shape the very fate of Westeros.